I'm really happy to share with you my freshest results of the, one-of-kind pottery assemblage and the pottery that was gathered during the works of the Sikait project. So the cooperation of the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona and Polish Centre of Mediterranean Archaeology. And today I wish to present the results of the last 4 seasons of surveys and excavations in ancient emerald mines in Wa di in eastern desert of Egypt. The main topic of my speech, so the unique pottery material, is the first ever ceramic assemblage recovered from inside the mines in Roman Egypt. And I won't be so wrong if I say that probably one of the largest underground pottery collection in whole Eastern Mediterranean. But with no further hesitation, let's go straight to the pot talk. Our mission works in Wa di Sikait since 2018, continuing the extensive surveys started by Steven Sidebottom in the 90s and early 21st century. We proceed two-way exploration. So first, we are archaeologically exploring settlements in Wa di Sikait itself. In recent years, we focused on the late antique town in the main Wa di Sikait settlement located in the central part of the Wa di National Park, and early Roman temple complex in Middle Sikait, so around 10 kilometers north from the main Sikait settlement. And secondly, we are intensively surveying and mapping settlements, outposts, roads, and most importantly, mining areas in Smaragdos region, so the inland and low mountains part of the eastern desert. We managed to study well several mining zones, especially zones G and H. Now our survey team recorded more than 400 entrances to the mines, and we explored partially or fully more than 20 of them. And thanks to the discoveries, we are now able to reconstruct a big part of the history of this place. This area is well known from the historic sources dating back to the Roman period as a source of green gems, emeralds, but more precisely beryl, so the green crystals. Mentioned in classical sources by Strabo, Pliny the Elder. It is also well attested from the late antique sources when the Blemis, so the indigenous tribe living in the eastern desert, supposedly took control over the whole region. What is mentioned in the text of Epiphanius of Salamis or Olympiodorus of Thebes or Cosmas Indicopleustes. And indeed, the archaeological record allows us to prove those claims, extending the time of activity there even wider. The chronology of the studied mining zones and the exploration areas spans at least from the early Hellenistic times to the Umayyad period, with the evident peaks of occupation in the early Roman and late antique periods. My speech today will refer exclusively to the pottery assemblage from the mines and some spaces connotated with the exploration, as the main goal is to present the character of pottery assemblage and multiple ways of its reuse in the special context of the underground galleries. So a few words now about the chronology, as it widely defines the structure of my talk and heavily affects the whole understanding of the in-mine pottery and further analysis. So the Ptolemaic period remains for now mainly elusive. We clearly see some activity, especially in the Middle Sikait, but no Hellenistic structures has been recorded. And furthermore, no ceramic material has been found inside the mine so far. The meager evidence from excavations and surveys, in Middle Sikait especially, indicates human activity in the second half of the 2nd and beginning of the 1st century BC, so indicating late Ptolemaic period. Sadly, nothing firmer can be said for now. In the early Roman period, we encountered much more complex situation. From the pottery perspective, the great heritage of Roberta Tomber set out the general picture of the pottery from this period, and she proposed packed typochronology for the Roman material from sites of much northern part of the eastern desert, so the Mios Hormos and Mons Claudianus, defining 3 main pottery horizons. Phase 1, I'll be calling here early Roman phase 1, so spanning from the reign of late Augustus to Nero. Phase 2, so from the reign of Nero to the reign of Trajan, and phase 3, covering most of the 2nd and the first half of the 3rd century AD. I'll be using these very rough chronological divisions as the main anchors of reference, because indeed we are able to spread the evidence from the mines, and in general from early Sikait on those key markers. So the mines from the surface are hard to miss. The entrances are marked by the slopes of the gray mining debris that was thrown out during the exploration from inside the mine out to the slopes. In the early 1st century AD, the mining boom is evident. It is seen both through the pottery and by the structures too. And we have an excellent representation of such structures, both on surface and as well the underground ones. The underground galleries of the early Roman phase 1 are easy to distinguish as they are following the mining techniques known from the other places in the empire. So they are perfectly square-shaped, located near the quartz veins. Its internal structure is based on the communication vertical shafts and horizontal exploration galleries. The structures from early Roman phase 2 are more irregular. They are depicting the gradual adaptation to local specificity of mining operation, particularly here in Eastern Desert, in order to reach a maximum efficiency. Entrances to the mines are now placed near iron veins, which are much more likely to hint good burial source. The galleries are now circular and follows the vein of precious stone. The logic of their construction is completely yielded to the functionality. The underground tunnels are full of junctions, holes facilitating movement and organization of work. We are usually encountering rock-cut installations as stairs, shelves for lamp placements, or wide spaces for the rest. The evidence for mining operation during early Roman phase 3, further Middle Roman and the late Antique period is much scarcer. We don't understand them fully yet, but in general we believe that the method of exploration did not change. It is challenging to differentiate new shafts and galleries cut in the later periods from the tunnels that were created in the early Roman phase 2, and miners from at least end of 4th century to the mid of 6th century, they were scavenging old early Roman mines, sometimes continuing mining works in the structures abandoned centuries before, leaving their gear and especially pottery behind. This results naturally in the mixed material inside of the galleries, making them impossible to date, basing solely on the pottery material and pottery dating. In Zone G, we found so far the largest mining system, connecting underground tunnels from few entrances. This mine is not only the mine system, not a singular mine. It's not only the longest and the deepest one, reaching more than 40 meters down and spreading for a total 1.5 kilometer, but also is the one of the most complicated ones. And the irregular tunnels inside are split to the 3 main vertical levels and are well communicated internally. Thanks to the ground, or should I rather say underground topographic work of our speleologist, Sergio Garcia Diz de la Vega, our team mapped big part of this system, and we were able to reach almost the bigger part of it during last season. But of course, it's not over. Just in the last days of our recent stay in the Eastern Desert, so January this year, the team discovered that the tunnels of this really maze, underground maze, continue much deeper and further. And well, certainly there is much more survey to do in the following years. Well, regularly there is not much archaeological material found in the abandoned mines, especially those bearing the features of the early Roman date. After the work was done, it seems that ancient miners took all they could and were moving to the other mines and shafts. And that's not surprising in such an isolated desert place as Wa di Sikait, and with very limited resources, one could bring from the Nile Valley or even the Red Sea coast to the middle of the desert. Every single tool had its value. As a result, during first season of the surveying and exploration, we find barely any pottery inside. Not to say about the other materials. Sporadic pieces of ropes, leather, wicks, charcoals. Well, the exploration of mine 229, so the first entrance marked like that of this big mine system I will be mainly speaking today about, yielded finally some good material and a little bit more of it. Besides of the better representation of pottery, we found a chisel and some finds that unveils like a big shadow covering our understanding of how and who actually worked inside. Because this question over who worked there still stays valid and is largely unanswered. Based on the previous surveys and finds dated to the early Roman period, we had some premises showing the presence of the army, as graffiti naming Legio Tertia Cyrenaica in the mine 129, found in 2019, or empty place for inscription at the entrance of another mine just nearby. However, only last season we found strong evidence reinforcing direct engagement of legionnaires into mining activities. In mine 229, the team encountered two schist stones used as labels for removing the baskets with emeralds from inside the mine. Both labels have an inscription on it referring to the Cohors Nigri Camarensiana, the unit of the Roman army that was well known from Nostracon that related it to the Wadi El Gemal fort. Besides providing the army presence there, it suggests that mining work in this area started at least during the reign of Tiberius. On the other side, only simple vertical strokes are visible. Possibly there are marks or quantity. Please take a closer look at the perforations on those schist labels. Each label has two little perforations, most probably to be easily attachable to the basket. Maybe the supervisors of the works were collecting the data based on the baskets with produced material during one day. Who knows? Finally, we observed that the mine 229 has multiple entrances from different sides of the same mountain. And the northernmost part, however, was blocked by the stone blockage, not allowing us for the further prospection. That left us with a blank spot, here marked with the question mark, on our underground map of the upper level of this huge mine system. During last two seasons, we mapped the tunnels behind the entrance to the mine 232, so this entrance closest to the question mark on the map, and we guessed that the tunnels of 232 and 229 are probably connected. The entrance to the mine 232 was originally covered from outside with a thick layer of rock debris, but now with the potential to explore the rest of the mine system, we decided to clear the path a little and to see what's inside. And where our speleologist led the way and gave us the call from inside that we shall definitely remove all the debris from the entrance and properly explore the galleries behind it. We found dense gallery system of disconnecting mine 232 that was most probably never touched by anyone for the last 2000 years. And the mine was abandoned while fully operating, which is the first case of such mine we found. And all the gear, all the tools and everyday use items were left behind. Lamps still lying on the rock shelves, tinders prepared for lighting up the fire, wicks and kindlings with the perfect condition, so the 0% of humidity and stable temperature throughout the year, the organic material is perfectly preserved. Among which we found now 4 perfectly preserved baskets, as you can see in the lower right corner, and most probably used for carrying burial out of the mines. Of course, I will not speak in detail about all those finds, as I want to finally skip to pottery after this little long introduction, but the variety of the quantity of archaeological material is truly remarkable. And that, of course, includes pottery. And of course, mines themselves are not all. There are many structures and archaeological objects related to the mining operation in this particular mining system, also usually filled with pottery. Among them, there are shrines, temples located nearby the entrances to the underground, sorting areas, so the places where the raw crystals were handpicked from the mass debris, and finally, rock-cut warehouses. The following quantification touches only the material from inside the mine, as my main aim today is to present a special character of this assemblage and how it affected the work and life of regular miner underground. So the pottery material gathered inside of the mines has 2 important characteristics. One is the state of preservation of forms. That is excellent. What you can see through the high rate of the average fragmentation value, marking 29 grams per fragment. And 2, it is derived from the very closed and undisturbed context. Therefore, we are able to quantify the pottery material very precisely, adjusting the standard method used in Sikait, so the full quantification method, with other measurements techniques like minimal number of vessels or the following assemblage, covering over 2,000 shards, is in my opinion perfect for starting the discussion about the precise use of pottery underground. Of course, we are hoping to enlarge the assemblage in the future years, to make it even more representative and ideally more advanced technology. Let's start with the general category spread. Shockingly to all of us, in the abandoned galleries of the mine system, we found mainly amphory material. Transport wares are dominating rest of the categories. Plain wares, so the category that we expect to find the most, we expect to dominate the rest of the categories, is the second most present group. Also, non-intuitive for me is very high percentage of the cooking wares inside. With comparison to the regular dwelling complex in Wa di Sikait, of course, early Roman Wa di Sikait, the cooking ware percentage is almost 2 times higher underground. One could argue that maybe this is a clear bias caused by the methodological approach, as we are counting all the shards. But no. Please look at the spread of the diagnostic fragments. We are dealing with at least 88 transport ware vessels inside. The percentage of the cooking ware is pronounced even stronger. What I also find really striking at the first sight is rather ephemeral presence of lamps. So intuitively the basic necessity underground, vessel that brings light. Please note that the storage vessels are completely absent from the context. As well, in the spread of recognized forms, we see clear dominance of the transport wares and kitchenware, specifically cooking pots. What I wish to point out, and what will be commented later, is very broad representation of different closed forms. All kinds of small size containers were in evident intensive use and reuse during the exploration work. So to sum up the basic quantification, why are we observing such an unusual picture? And trying to answer those questions and understand the Asian miners, we need to start thinking as one. And now I wish to show you what it feels like to descend into galleries and work under the old mountains of Eastern Desert. We have to bear in mind the special conditions that Asian miners had to face. Clearly, those affect selection of pottery used inside, and foremost, character of use. And as you could see, there are some serious disadvantages to be inside the mines, like complete darkness. With no artificial source of light, one need to crawl in the absolute dark, and the dark that starts a few meters away from the entrance. Limited space.
Estamos en 1929, actualmente al fondo de la mina, récord de profundidad, más de 40, creo unos 46 metros. Y aquí al fondo, al final de la galería, tenemos una pequeñísima ventanita a través de la cual se entra y una chimenea preciosa. Y ahora, para que os hagáis una idea de la estrechez, tendremos a Sergio asomando por aquí, intentando salir. Es realmente bastante estrecho. Aquí vemos a Sergio. Estrechito esto, ¿eh?
So very limited space, as you can see. The galleries are very narrow, sometimes allowing to move only in one direction. It is impossible to stand up inside. Also, one can only crawl and sometimes sit. And for instance, on the video that you just seen, this is one of the holes, the passage holes that were regularly connecting communication shafts in the very deep place of the mine 229. It was absolutely regular place of everyday movement inside of this mine. And the other two things are high temperature. So the team that is surveying mines in the coldest months of the January, we are dealing with the extensive heat inside, reaching 40 degrees. What to say about the later months? And the human crawling inside such a narrow and heated tunnels dehydrates very quickly. And finally, the big disadvantage of being inside is the dust. Here you can see the record of how we are exploring one of the deepest rooms in the mine 232. And in the light coming from the headlight of Pachi, you can see how dusty this place is. Of course, we are forced to work in the protecting masks, just not to choke on the dust, and of course not to get asbestosis after getting out from those tunnels. And the atmosphere inside quickly becomes heavily dusted. And this is caused by the structure of the local rock, schist, which is very flaky by its nature. It tends to transform into cloud of powder when mechanically crushed. While exploring the mine, we were crawling through the thick clouds of dust and not even imagine what happened inside when somebody was actually mining the stone. So the pottery inside was therefore used to supplement those shortages and to face those hard circumstances. I wish to go one by one, presenting the material that could help miners to survive. So the dark was elucidated by the oil lamps, of course, and they were put on the small shelves on the level of the head to enlight maximum space in the passage and not to choke miners with the smoke. The repertoire of forms is rather narrow, what helps us establish a good chronology for the last moment of the gallery's exploration. We are encountering frog lamps, which typologically indicates the end of 1st and the 2nd century AD, as well in the tunnels of most recent branch of the mining system, so the new mine 234, we encountered two fully preserved so-called potato lamps, so the 2nd and 3rd century evolution of the long frog lamp production tradition. All frog lamps bear interesting features on the external side of the base, as you can see here. So the pre-firing inside stylized letter A. Thanks to the consultation with Dr. Małgorzata Kaiser and taking into consideration pale yellowish beige fabric, Alexandria can be suggested as a production place for those lamps. In many cases, we are finding lamps as they were, so in situ, left by miners as they were. Here you can see the example of the lamp shelf, and below, worked base of the alluvial amphora used as a tinder, with palm fibers ready to be lightened up, also in situ. And by lamps, I don't understand only lamps in the form of the lamp. Most of the time, miners were reusing other pottery pieces by simply putting a fudge inside the body shirt or into the reused base. Here we have some examples of such reused pottery. Very common are torches made of the worked Egyptian amphora 3 bases. The internal part is heavily burned. The bottom of the foot is nicely worked to make the grip firmer and more handy. Also, we find common evidence of reusing other suitable pieces of pottery like amphora stoppers, shallow bowls, worked jug bases, or simply amphora body shirts. They were using everything that goes. Limited space also affected the selection of pottery assemblage carried inside. Presented small plain-ware juglets with double or single handle could be easily attached to the belt or clothes of a miner. Those forms are usually pitched inside with a thick layer of resin, presented in this photo here on the top. Capacity of such juglets is around 150 or 200 millimeters, so in my opinion too small and too impractical given the size of the spout to drink from it. My working hypothesis is that they could have served as an additional or even emergency source of fuel to refill the lamp that flicked out. Well, the heat and dust had to be endured, and there was no real escape from it. To avoid dehydration in such atmosphere and to keep one's throat not dry to be able to communicate, it was necessary to regularly drink. We are finding some equipment to serve specifically this role, starting from surprisingly rich representation of the amphorae. In mine 232 and 234, almost all amphorae of Egyptian origin represented the type of Egyptian amphora 3.2 from the Tombers typology. Once again indicating later 1st century and the beginning of the 2nd century dating. 98% of preserved forms were pitched inside with resin, which is not common, what could limit the evaporation in very dry and hot environment. The life of amphorae certainly did not finish after the vessel was emptied from its original content. Most probably, the amphorae were used as stationary containers for liquid. Alternatively, fully preserved necks of the amphorae could have been used as stands. The more supply you gather inside, the less you need to go climb out, which takes a lot of time and also is very tiring. Those amphorae pieces were found in more spacious areas, like crossroads, rest halls, or vertical shafts, so the space is suitable for resting or even having a meal inside. Surprisingly again, not only Egyptian amphora was found inside. We found a very interesting representation of imports. And while Campanian Dressel 2-4 is rather a standard find for the early Roman Eastern Desert context in general, those two examples of Dressel 2-4 similes of yet unknown origin are quite exquisite. The fresh break of those two necks revealed abundant presence of the shale and microfossils. Combined with the very bright orange color of the surface and grainy structure of the matrix, I'm wondering if they could have been produced in Benghazi, on the Libyan coast. As you see, both vessels bear red dipinto. There are similar forms and also inscribed with red and black dipinti, reported by Roberta Tomber from Mons Claudianus, dated to the reign of Nero. Roberta claimed that they were produced in Cilicia, which is also Canal. If anyone knows good parallels to those forms, especially to very grainy, bright orange fabric, please let me know. I would very grateful to learn something more. So, what the ancient miners drank? The rich amphora assemblage, merged with excellent representation of stoppers, some of them inscribed in black and red, is leaving no doubt that the primary content of majority of vessels was wine. As well, we found many fragments of the water kegs, characteristic by the simple form of rim and formation technique of spheric wheeling. The planeware material allows us to make two observations. One, the liquids were precious for the miners. We collected already a nice representation of jugs and juglets reused as funnels. The shoulder are precisely worked around. The spout is chipped off to make it easier to pour a liquid from the bigger vessel to the smaller one. The size of such a reinvented funnels can vary, allowing for filling the bigger and smaller container, or refilling. The second observation is that most of the liquid vessels for the personal use, so the medium-sized jugs, flasks, or bottles, were made of the marl clay. I wonder if miners were choosing consciously the lightest and the most porous clay from the Egyptian repertoire to maximally limit the weight of carried equipment and to keep the temperature of the drink colder. Speaking about the food, it is too time-consuming to go out from the mine, to climb up and eat outside on the fresh air. The food had to be brought inside. This observation can be reinforced by the high percentage of the kitchenware in the total assemblage, as I exposed during the presentation of the general quantification of categories. Not only we document full forms of the globular cooking pots inside with the remains of the organic residues, but also little rounded and shallow installations where the cooking pots were placed in situ. Please notice that the wall over the pots in the fire near the cooking pots is fire blackened. You can see that over the cooking pots body shirts on the right photo. In the right photo. It is for me unimaginable to just consider that the cooking was proceed inside of the mine, or even the heating of the food. Even with the good gravitational ventilation that we have there, it is not enough to fully get rid of the smoke from burning things. Thus, I'm not yet ready to explain how the process of food preparation looked like. If anyone has any conception, also I'd be very curious of your opinions and ideas. And of course, food had to be served. As I showed earlier, we have some limited representation of finewares, even very deep inside of the mine system. Again, what we gain from this category is a good chronology derived via parallels published from Milos Hormos by Roberta Tomber. Presented thin-walled forms of goblets fired in the pink calamitic clay of Aswan region production center are characteristic for the second half of the 1st century AD and foremost first half of the 2nd century AD. Alongside, we have scarce representation of other classes. Imports are extremely rare, what is rather a rule for the early Roman context in the Eastern Desert. The last vessels I wish to show were found in the deepest room, rounded room of mine 232, very close to each other. Honestly speaking, finding half-complete faience vessels so deep in the mines, almost 40 meters down from the entrance, is little ridiculous to me. But the glass bottle you can see here on the left is even more inexplicable. Similar glass forms were published by Peacock as well from Milos Hormos, dated to the 1st and 2nd century AD. Following his suggestions, they most probably contain medicaments. Given the hard conditions inside, access to the first aid could have been a crucial thing. And of course, it is too early to say anything more convincing at this stage without the residual analysis. From the macroscopic point of view, the transport material inside of the mine system is dominated by the Egyptian production and represented by very narrow typological horizon. The Egyptian amphora 3 and 4 appears only in 3 fabric variants: regular Nile alluvial clay, mixed Mar and Nile clay, and richly organic tempered golden mica alluvial variant. While petrographic analysis is pending, it seems that the amphora material was brought to the Zone G from no more than 3 different production centers. In the comparison to the variety of fabrics observed on the very same types in the Middle Sikait, main Sikait site or even Berenike picture from the mine seems to be rather narrow. An extraordinary class recorded throughout the underground tunnels is Crow SC, so the class of Persian Gulf origin transport jars, well documented from the Parthian period in many sites of Arabia and southern Iraq. Those vessels have long tradition of production. However, types similar to this presented green at top, right top, are dated to the 2nd and 3rd century AD. What makes those containers different from anything that we know from Mediterranean is bitumen coating that was sealing whole internal surface of the vessel. The vessel from this mine was also marked with the red dipinto, but sadly the state of preservation of it is too poor to tell anything more. Fabric spread in every category shows pretty much the same picture. Miners working in Zone G were richly supplied from the Nile. Aswan region seems to be a particularly strong producer of mundane equipment used in the Smaragdos mines. Once again, I wish to point out the very big overrepresentation of the marl wide-sleeved vessels in the plainware category. So those vessels made in very light fabric and the fabric of the great porosity. But living underground was not the only trace of the activity of the Asian workers. We also encountered and explored many related structures that allowed us to peek into the daily life of the miner. Our survey resulted in recording number of sacral structures constructed or rock cut just next to the busiest road connecting mining zone with Wa di Sikait and neighboring Wa di. One of such structures I wish to comment, because of quite impressive pottery assemblage gathered there, was a rock-cut temple in the Wadi Selimate in Zone G. Here we encountered early Roman platform and stairs leading to the temple, here on the top left, connected by the very narrow path with also rock-cut magazine, the lower picture. The surface of small rock shelf in front of the sacral structure and the magazine was covered with pottery material. Unfortunately, the storeroom itself must have been looted somewhere in the 20th century AD. The pottery material gathered during survey of this terrace, the temple terrace, and during the excavations in the magazine consisted mainly of the amphora shards. The origin spread of this material spans from Mauritania to Sinopa and is the widest range found in any singular context so far, and I mean for whole Sikait. I would like to also highlight that proportion of imports to regional material. Here it is much higher than in mass material from early Roman Berenike, which is the coastal site and emporium of trade. Imports in this very remote and hard to access place, with not only the middle of the desert, but also very hard to reach place with almost vertical stairs leading to this terrace, is reaching over 13.5%, while in Berenike, in the early Roman assemblage of amphora, imports are equaling more or less 9% of total assemblage. Similar statistics also can be drawn from already commented assemblage from inside of the mine. Furthermore, during this survey, we found a rim of the Western Indian jar. Parallel forms within the Priestman's classification of Indian Ocean pottery, called linves, represent long tradition of production spanning from the 1st century BC to even 10th century AD. Petrographic analysis performed by Mary Ownby from University of Arizona confirmed its eastern provenance. This fine and rich variety of the Mediterranean imports gives us an interesting insight into demand for extra-regional goods generated by the keepers of the temple or whoever was governing this place. Also, it allows to see the organization and the deep involvement of long-distance trade in supplying such remote places. Lastly, I wish to get back for a little while, and to underground and to remind you about the baskets. So under each individual basket we found, there was an inscribed ceramic token with a name in Greek scratched on it. We are speculating over the use of such tokens to potentially mark the basket as a property of certain worker, of the identification of a certain worker. In the long-lasting discussion over functionality of the ceramic tokens or ceramic discs in general, we wish to suggest another one, the function of marker. And we also attest archaeologically that tokens were cut in the direct vicinity of the mine entrance. Next to the nearby shrine, few meters away from the tunnel, we record a set of 24 tokens with chippings still lying in situ nearby. Possibly they could have been cut for the use inside of the mine system. So to sum up, I'll go with conclusions. So we can draw a general picture from the assemblage. The functionality was the most important value, being directive in the selection of the pottery used inside. The pottery had to help miners to endure challenging underground circumstances at most. What we see also in mass is a common reusing of the pottery. When the pot broke, its usage did not end. Chronology, the chronological observations indicate strongly that the main moment of the exploration in Zone G occurred in the end of 1st and the beginning of the 2nd century AD, so the phase early Roman. Finally, we see a high-scale engagement of the imperial state to supply this work base. By the prism of limited Egyptian range of material provenance, and on the other hand, the variety of the imported transport material, we can see that all the transport vessels were headed directly to Zone G, most probably in organized shipment. This aligns well with the textual evidence from the early Roman quarries from the northern part of the eastern desert, so the Mons Claudianus and Mons Porphyrites, with more and more textual evidence recovered from Indians that I did not have time to talk about today, but they are also quite remarkable finds. I hope we will be able to unveil soon the and fully the secrets of the supply logistics for this fascinating zone. Okay, so that's the conclusion of the first half of my presentation. No, just kidding. This is a classical bait joke that our speleologist Sergio keeps repeating when we crawl towards the exit after exhausting day of underground exploration. So we are not in halfway there. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.